Welcome to The Detail. I am your host, Cathy Antunes, and you are listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5, LPFM in Sarasota, Florida. It's been kind of a bombshell week in local politics. And before we get talking, I want to make it clear that the opinions expressed on this show are the opinions of those who are expressing them, and not necessarily the opinions of WSLR, its staff, or supporters. With me today is Jane Goodwin. She has served on the Sarasota School Board for how many years, Jane? Is it
12 years.
12 years. And of course, our topic today is the recent revelations about Christian Ziegler, the chair of the Florida GOP, as well as his wife, Bridget, who serves on the school board and just recently served as chair and passed the baton to Karen Rose, who is now chair of the school board. But of course, Bridget is also well known as a co-founder of Moms for Liberty. And some of the topics here are something that parents may not want their children to hear. We're going to be sensitive in this discussion, but I just want to warn, if you have small children or even older children, you may want to listen to this on the archive. So with that, Jane, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, it's the first time I've ever had to give that kind of a disclaimer before a show on local politics. But to just give a thumbnail sketch for those who, if you haven't heard, there is an ongoing police investigation into a rape allegation brought forward by a woman who is saying that she was raped by Christian Ziegler on October 2nd. There is a pretty extensive police report, as well as a search warrant affidavit that went to Google for the contents of Mr. Ziegler's Gmail account. One of the revelations within these documents was that the woman saying she had been raped by Mr. Ziegler also revealed that she had been involved in a consensual liaison with the couple, with Christian and Bridget Ziegler acknowledged to the police that this was in fact true about a year ago, and she says it happened one time. The context of this is important. It might not matter at all in terms of, that history with Mrs. Ziegler and this woman and her husband, except Mrs. Ziegler is a co-founder of Moms for Liberty and has engaged in extreme rhetoric toward the LGBTQ plus community, and has been the face of the Don't Say Gay legislation in Florida, which she has claimed to play a role in creating. Her husband is the chair of the Florida GOP, and his online activity is also quite harsh and on board with marginalizing and accusing those in the LGBTQ community of being groomers, making life very hard for educators, engaging in the claim that critical race theory is being taught in schools. So in Florida, we've seen a real impact on our curriculum in high schools. We've seen a real chilling effect on how LGBTQ students feel, and their families and their friends. So Jane, I tried to encapsulate that as best I can. I guess when you heard about these allegations, can you share your reaction? It was, I think, for our community, pretty explosive and shocking.
Well, I was shocked. I was doing some Christmas baking and had my hands in a baking dish, so my phone blew up, and I got the first couple of articles that I guess that came out about this. At first, I thought it was a joke of some sort. I mean, I didn't realize that it was reality. And then when I read on and I was aghast, I thought, oh my gosh, how can this happen to the school board again? My concern is with Sarasota County Public Schools,
Right.
something that Mrs. Ziegler has never cared anything about since she got on the school board in 2014, I might add. But my
Okay.
concern is with the students and the children that are in our school district. And we've had so many things going on with her spearheading, removing the last superintendent and other things that
Yeah.
predicated my concern for her serving.
And I do want to make it clear, these are allegations. Obviously,
Correct.
the process that's going to play out regarding Mr. Ziegler and this situation that occurred on October 2nd. The police report says Mr. Ziegler said he videotaped the incident. So that's one thing. But what's not in dispute is this relationship with the woman and the married couple, the Zieglers.
Yes.
Yeah. So for those who watch local politics closely, and you're talking about it now, it was because I've tracked dark money in our local races, and Mrs. Ziegler's race in 2014, she had been appointed to the school board by Rick Scott a few months before the election was to take place. There was a vacancy. One of the members had retired or resigned. Resigned. Okay. And then we saw an influx of $45,000, which I traced back to a Wyoming LLC in a dark money PAC that made a decisive difference for Mrs. Ziegler. Ken Marsh was her opponent at the time. He was very well funded, outpaced her. I mean, she was a newbie, somebody who had just moved from Miami. She and Christian Ziegler were, recently married. They were expecting a baby, and, she's on the school board. So without that $45,000 and the ability it gave her to be competitive, and the race was close, it was a close race.
Well, it was a close race, but she was not a contributing member to the Sarasota County School Board. Here she is, very limited education, very limited experience, a new mother of a baby. And she comes on the school board. There were good people that applied to be on the school board, but they chose her. And she had very limited things to say at first. When Eric Robinson got on the school board, the two of them liaised together, and they became, a driving force, a voting force, and that sort of thing.
Right.
But the important thing to remember is that she never assimilated with nor became a thriving part of the board itself. So she was always on the outside. She never contributed. Never once did she contribute to our platform. Every year we get a platform together. We have a lobbyist that works in Tallahassee on our behalf. Never once was she a part of that process, nor did she have anything to do, as well connected as she was. She was in Tallahassee doing her own thing with the likes of Jeb Bush and other foundations that supported choice.
Okay.
Which is
so tell us about that, because for me, the dark money was a big red flag. It's always a red flag with candidates, as far as I'm concerned, is who are they really working for? And she fit the profile, as you're describing, of a novice, not somebody who really was on a firm professional footing necessarily in her life.
Correct.
And so when you have this sort of novice aspect, somebody that, may be working, but they may be like financially vulnerable, they're just not that solid. And I always, especially lately in politics, have thought, do they have the ability to say no to these overlords who are funding them, and especially when we don't even know who those overlords are? So what you're describing as unusual, somebody who really didn't assimilate, she didn't become part of the team, but she was actively lobbying in Tallahassee. Can you tell me what was, you said choice. Can you explain to us exactly what you mean by that? What was she doing?
Yes. She believes in school choice and the opening up, as we see today, of universal vouchers, meaning that today, I don't know what percentage of private school students, most of the vouchers that we have in Sarasota County this year that go to private schools are going to fund those kids that were already in private schools. So now they get a scholarship for us to go to a Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
And now the Catholic Church has upped the tuition. It happened here, and it's happened in other parts of Florida. It's done by diocese. It did happen here. I've checked with some of our officials in office who have children in private schools who have told me, yes, we got a raise this year because they were told that they could do that this year. I never thought this would happen, Cathy.
Mm-hmm.
Public money being given to private schools, many of which are religious. It is separation of church and state for me, but not for others. And this is the taking down of public education as I know it, as you know it. And I think it is an important part of our community. So
Yeah.
I'm always on a school board. I'm getting paid on the school board. I'm here for Sarasota County Schools, and I'm no longer on the school board, but I'm still here for Sarasota County Public Schools.
Right.
And she never was. She never ever was. And because she got on the board without having to run at first, and she was a pretty lightweight at first, and then somebody started writing out things for her to say, and she would come, with something to say, and it would be written down, and she would read it, and then on rebuttal, she would, kind of lose it again because she's never been a great communicator in terms of being able to make her points and to negotiate things. She's not a negotiator. So I began to see that pattern. Who's writing this for her? Could it be her husband? Perhaps. But this is the way things went. And then when Eric came on the board, the two of them had 2 votes now. So, we always had 3 who were more centrist, more concerned about public schools. And until I left the board in 22, what is it?
So
in 22, yeah.
Yeah. So we're being joined right now by Ron Filipkowski and it's Jane.
Hi, guys.
Hey, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Pal.
I was saying at the intro.
What are you talking about anyway?
Oh, right.
Yes.
The bombshell of local politics, right? Or Florida politics, really, even nationally. The story about Bridget and Christian Ziegler, the rape allegation, as well as the acknowledgement that this couple was involved with another woman, and she is also, the victim in the rape allegation. So Ron Filipkowski, you both were Republicans, right?
We were the last normal ones.
Yeah.
And then
right?
we left, and now there aren't any more.
I gotta say, because I was an independent for 30 years. I've voted across the board and really actually leaned a little more toward the Republican side in my life prior to the nuttiness. And I had been in some of those meetings because as an independent, I was welcome. And it has become, I know, Ron, you took issue with how Rebecca Jones, when she was working for the Department of Health in Florida, was posting data. And there was a search of her home, which you found highly illegal and that the governor way overstepped. And so you went online and kind of became a viral sensation. And now you're very well versed in Twitter or X, right? And you report on this extremism. So now that I've got you both here, I want to ask you specifically regarding the Zieglers, but also in general, and we'll start with you, Ron. Can you describe this progression you've seen, and really locally? I'm more interested locally because Sarasota has been described as the epicenter of this right-wing extremism. And in fact, some of them have moved here, like Mike Flynn. So, Ron, you were involved with the party as an officer. Tell tell me what that's been like, and also what you saw with Bridget and Christian in the beginning of their ascent, politically here.
Okay, well, yeah, those are two different things,
They are.
somewhat. Yeah, the first part I'll just take. I was the president of South Sarasota Republican Club in 09 and 10 for 2 years, and that was, of course, during the Barack Obama campaign against was it McCain, right?
Right.
And so that was really the first time when sort of some alarm bells were being set off for me, because of a lot of the racist stuff, and the anti-immigrant, the anti-Muslim, the Barack Hussein Obama, all that kind of stuff really bubbled to the surface quite a bit. And but at that time, I will say that I felt it was just like a handful, like 10%. I didn't think it was a very widespread thing, and I don't think it really all came out to the surface until 2016 with the Trump campaign, where you started really seeing, the Tea Party people who had their own thing going on locally. And I went to some of those meetings, which were a little bit nutty. But they crashed the party, and they were starting to show up at the local Republican club meetings. And then new people started coming in who we had never seen before. And, to me, before you knew it, the inmates had taken over the asylum. And I will say that I think that Jane could speak to this too, maybe, is that Trump really, I think, enabled a lot of the people who had latent bad stuff that they didn't say out loud. He made it okay for them to then say it out loud. And so I was just completely disgusted at that point and checked out of the whole thing and stopped going to any of the meetings.
Yeah. And so, Jane, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I do. I ran for office in 2010. One of the first Republican clubs that I went to speak at was that South County club. And I was so happy to see Ron there, because I've always thought that was a bit fringy. And that was really, to me, the beginning of the Tea Party. Walt Augustinowitz coming out of Inglewood, and for me, they all wanted to know my feelings on Planned Parenthood and sex education. And gosh, I didn't have any idea, except that I knew it was taught in middle school. But I didn't know anything about Planned Parenthood in our schools. They weren't in our schools at that time. And just really nasty to me. And then I thought, gee, I know some of these people. I ran some campaigns for George Bush, for Jeb Bush, and for the whole county. And I mean, I was, a fixture in the Republican office. And these people are like, where are they coming from? Who are these people? And a lot of them were new people coming into the state, I will say that. But they chose to chase me around through the referendum, which was the spring of 2010. Walt Augustinowitz, dear Rod Thompson, who's still a big, I understand, getting paid Republican now, and
hang on a minute.
And Richard Swire.
Yeah, Rod Thompson was the spokesman for the Cyber Ninjas,
Yes.
And he was recently on a Tiger Bay panel talking about election security. This is a local club, nonpartisan club, which totally blew my mind. I'm like, what are you doing, having, of all people, Rod Thompson, who was the spokesman for the Cyber Ninjas, talking about election security? There's a disconnect that happens here. And then to speak to this Tea Party aspect, you were talking about the referendum for the extra penny the extra
1 mil. 1 mil for Sarasota County only.
Sorry about that. To fund our schools. We actually, approve every 4 years this extra tax. And Sarasota County schools, it's the reason I moved here. All these places in Florida, I wanted that education, right, for my kids. So looking at these attitudes, and specifically Ron, regarding Christian Ziegler, I had watched his fomenting the Stop the Steal on Twitter, and Joe Gruder's too, but really Christian was a brasher voice about election fraud. Can you speak to his tactics on social media? Because for me, it's been a pretty brass knuckle approach. Yeah. Please go ahead and share.
Yeah. Again, when I sort of checked out of all that, Christian, I never really, my impressions of Christian years ago when I first met him were, he was probably, early 20s. I never saw Bridget. Bridget never came to any of the meetings. I never saw her at all. First time I ever saw her was when he announced, "This is my wife and she's running for school board." I had never seen her at a political event before that. So I was just like, why is she running and not him? I just figured he probably thought he couldn't win and she had a better chance of winning, maybe.
Well, I got to tell you something. What was interesting at that time is, because I was working at WSRQ, filling in for one of the hosts there, and he was her surrogate in debates. She didn't show up for debates. And
so it was like a proxy campaign.
Yeah. I mean, he spoke for her literally, but so go ahead.
And Jane talked about that at the school board meetings too. But I will say that, you could tell though right away that this is an ambitious guy. This was a guy who tried to ingratiate himself to me, to Joe Gruters, to Vern, to anybody he thought had any influence or power or whatever, he would suck up to you basically. So that's always kind of what I saw is just that glad handing, smiley kind of guy. And then, I wake up on social media 4 years later in 2020, and I see this evil Trumpian, nasty character. And, maybe he was that way somewhat before, and I just didn't see that side of him. But yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people during that time period did undergo a transformation and did become a lot rougher around the edges, meaner, nastier. And he's one of the worst people on social media. He always has been. But, the interesting thing is he gets no engagement. He has some followers that he got when he became state party chair. But if you look at his engagement, the people who reply and retweet him, it's almost nothing. Sometimes he'll tweet stuff and he'll get 10 likes. Now, for the state chair of the Republican Party to get 10 likes on a tweet, that's pretty pathetic.
Yeah, that is pretty.
And you would know, Ron, because you've got so many followers, and it's amazing. I always check your space when I go on Twitter first thing. It's great.
Yeah, well, we need voices of common sense, right? Because at the end of the day, we actually agree on a lot of things. Can you tell me, Ron, we're speaking Wednesday, December 6th. So it's not even a week. What is the social media vibe these days? I mean, they're relatively well known for local officials or state officials, would you say?
Well, he put out an email a couple days ago to the state party people, singled me out, and blamed me for his problems, which is pretty funny,
You're a powerful guy. Look at that.
I just made it national, help make it national. It probably would have anyway. And, really what I can tell you guys is this from a social media perspective, people aren't as much interested in Christian and his scandal as they are Bridget. And the Moms for Liberty thing is what makes this a national story. This is not a national story without Bridget and Moms for Liberty. It's a state story. It's a local story. What made it a national story is Bridget. And that's what, when I've talked to Washington Post, Daily Beast, Associated Press about this, they really only want to talk about the Moms for Liberty part of it, because that's the hypocrisy part. But the other part I'll say is when you look at the comments of Rick Scott, Ron DeSantis, all the cabinet members, some of the state party chairs, and even there was one statement issued today by a big religious conservative group that's backed Ziegler in the past. They all say the same thing, and they all say whether the rape allegations are true or not does not matter to them. Just what he admitted to is enough for them to want him to go.
Yeah.
And for us to want her to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a different issue, because you don't really hear anybody calling for her to step down from her positions very much nationally. The more the focus to resign, I'm talking about statewide, more the focus to resign is on Christian. And I think that has to do with DeSantis's relationship with Bridget. seems to be closer than it is with Christian. So I think maybe he's running cover for her and trying to separate her out from this thing and trying to protect her and just sacrifice him. That seems to be what they're trying to do here. But I don't know. I would be surprised. I mean, is she going to show up at this next school board meeting? Because it's going to be hot.
Yeah,
you know?
December 12th at 6 p.m. is the Sarasota County School Board meeting. You know, I have to say locally, which is, you know, her main position that we care about in Sarasota is her position as a member of the school board. And I have to say the sentiments out there locally are she cannot continue. This is outrageous. She has made herself, you know, nobody would care. Listen, what you're doing between consenting adults, it's not something I think any of us are all that interested in or care about, but they have made it. And Bridget in particular has made it everyone's business because she is the one who has been the face of a group that Moms for Liberty, this don't say gay legislation, her anti-CRT work, but here she is engaging in the very, you know, world that she claims is, you know, bad for our kids and we can't talk about it and all that. So that her hypocrisy, I mean, her literal brand nationally is around these issues. Oh, and Jane, do you have to
well, I just want to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's already been a Moms for Liberty group in Pennsylvania that's broken with the national.
Yes.
And they've already said, we don't buy this. This is not cool. Yeah. And I think that will continue. But you all don't know her like I know her, which is to know her is to know how the stories she tells, and many of them are lies. But she was always working quietly in Tallahassee, unknown to the school board. Her agenda and our agenda were drastically different. And she never told us a thing, never said a word, never a peep. She was more talkative at the school board meeting after Eric Robinson got on the board, and she had a friend and foe there. And so they worked closely together. But Bridget Ziegler has been cruel to Black students, to special needs kids. This isn't brought up much, but she engaged the governor and had them do a 3-year survey and oversight of our ESC department after the DJ case, which was appealed. And there was some problems that we had with legal counsel. And to this day, there have been some issues that she caused that were political in nature more so than anything else. But she wanted to change things about the way we did things. She also has been horrible to our LGBTQ students. And that's where I have a problem. I worked hard to get a lot of safety and a lot of space within our schools for them to have clubs and to be proud of who they were. And she came along and wiped that out. Same thing with book bans. Same thing with all of the, you know, the prayers and the Christian attitude coming at us at the school board meetings. And then Tom Edwards, whom I think and admire as doing a good job. She has been very vocal in making sure that someone gets up in front of the school district. And it's usually the same people.
See, I want to
the same people, and really causes fodder for him and says horrible things about him.
So, you know, the dynamic that I've witnessed, and I'd like you to either, you know, flesh it out a little more for me, but it appears because both, you know, Christian has this micro-targeted media company, which is involved in social media messaging for campaigns. And they've been a constant presence on different conservative talk shows. Even in Australia, Christian has shown up on these talk shows with Bridget too. And it appears that there's this posse that we've seen in Sarasota of Moms for Liberty. Some of them aren't on there anymore, of women, and even orchestrated stunts. So it isn't necessarily that Bridget is saying these things, but she is facilitating the abuse of Mr. Edwards at a couple of meetings by her cohorts. And then one time when it happened, I believe, he was accused of being a groomer, and should he be reading to our children? It was really awful stuff. That night, Bridget and it was Melissa Bikondi appeared on a conservative talk show to discuss what happened, and that Bikondi was being denied. And you were the one that you shut it down, didn't you, Jane?
Yes, I did. I did. And they were very critical of me for shutting down some of these dialogues and for asking people to leave the board meeting, which I did. I mean, I put my teacher hat on and I rule the board meetings pretty strictly because I had to do so.
Yeah,
but she had no control for the whole year that she was chair, and then missed about half the meetings, I think. She really has been not a terrific performer, not keeping up to date with all of the things she needs to do as school board chair. I will tell you that. So it's a good thing that Karen Rose has now assumed that duty. But I don't care about Christian. That will all be taken care of with the courts or with hopefully something legally. But I care about her. And we have had so much going on with the school district since this new group has come into office in 2022. The firing of the superintendent, the attempting to get Vermillion in, the scandal, scratching a strategic plan that was good. And we need now to stop all of this fodder and have her step down for the good of the school board and the district and move on.
Yeah. So, out there in the national coverage of this, people talk about Bridget being on the Reedy Creek board. People talk about Bridget, and Moms for Liberty. But Bridget has also served on the committee to appoint the new president for New College. And which was been taken over, they want to make it the Hillsdale College of the South. She has, what I'd like to have fleshed out, because you say Vermillion, and most people don't really know what that is. So Jane, can you explain what happened with Bridget wanting to hire Vermillion Education? And Ron, I'd like you to comment on just this Hillsdale connection and how that fits. So Jane, what happened with Vermillion from where you sit?
Well, Vermillion was a newly formed company of about 3 months by an employee from Hillsdale College who believes in the classical approach. Let me just say that I think that this group of reformers in the state of Florida want the classical approach to be taught throughout schools, district public schools as well. But this particular individual came to Bridget, and she kind of subtly wove it into comments at the end of a board meeting. It wasn't an agenda item or anything else, but this was a person who was going to charge a lot of money. And he was not credentialed to know anything about operations at a school district. And he was going to come in and study every facet of our district, from curriculum, pedagogy, operations, and he was going to make some recommendations on what we should do. I mean, are you kidding me? And that's, in essence, she kind of waded her way in, you see, with, in comments that board members make at the end of the meeting. Well, I've been looking at this and this might be a good thing to do. And then it was discussed, and it was like, what? Why would we want to do this? It made no sense.
It was a mention. It didn't follow the proper process. It didn't hear, the public had really no legally required notice. And so she was trying to slide this thing in for some wet behind the ears consultant who really was pushing a Hillsdale College curriculum. Ron, what do you see? There's a Chris Rufo connection with Bridget and Hillsdale. Yeah. So can you share?
So I could talk about that somewhat. I mean, there is a national movement, and of course it's, Corey DeAngelis, Chris Rufo, Betsy DeVos finances a lot of their activity. Dennis Prager is, of course, another one. And, they have an agenda, and they're really, to me, their agenda is a homeschool privatization agenda. And we're seeing it being implemented right now in Oklahoma. And that's why I pay close attention to what is happening in Oklahoma, because that's the model, that's the test case. They have a new superintendent over the state named Ryan Walters. He is one of these guys. He's basically like taking Chris Rufo and putting him in charge of the state public school system in your state. That's what's happening. And, there's two things that he has done. First in the nation ever, he has given charter school tax dollars to Catholics, private elementary and high schools. Okay. That is unconstitutional. The Oklahoma State Attorney General, who is a Republican, conservative Republican, said it's unconstitutional. And he's actually, the school system in Oklahoma and the Attorney General are now in a lawsuit against each other over that. And Ryan Walters has said it, because I'm telling you this because this is what they want for Florida. And Ryan Walters has said he understands that it's unconstitutional under current law, but he intends to take his case up to the U.S. Supreme Court, because he thinks that right now, with the justices being what they are now, that he is going to be able to get that 80-year-old case law overturned on state tax dollars going to private religious schools. He's also implemented just recently this week prayer in school, where he is having students read Christian prayers over the loudspeakers in elementary schools. He is aware that that is unconstitutional, but he said he doesn't care. He disagrees with the Supreme Court about that, and he's going to challenge that. So this is what is happening. This is a plan. It's well orchestrated. They plan to try and reverse basically 80 years of separation of church and state case law.
And we just have seen, and Jane, you were touching on this earlier, Ron, before you joined us, that the universal vouchers, what has gone on is, parents who have their children in private schools, and of course the parochial schools, Catholic schools. And I sent one of my sons to one of those schools. But they take the voucher immediately. They're getting an $8,000 reimbursement. These are rich families or well-to-do families, because they're already paying for this tuition. But what did the schools do? They hiked the tuition. It's a windfall for these private religious schools. And look, they're not subject to the same requirements as actual public schools. They don't take everybody that applies. It's not like you can compare the outcomes. They cherry pick their students. And so public schools have to educate all comers, right? And this plan actually drains or siphons dollars with less accountability. But bringing it back to Bridget, Jane, what it sounds like you're saying is this was always her agenda. She was always working on privatization from the beginning, and she was not forthright or working as a team with the school board to come up with cohesive policy.
No, she was not.
Okay.
And there were times that we had a board meeting on the mask mandate, which I wrote a policy in 24 hours that was approved by 3 of the 5 of us.
Yeah.
That put masks into use again when we were having a terrible 26% COVID percentage, and the hospitals had begged us to do this. And I had it on a Friday night so she could be there, because she's so busy and so involved. And she shows up from Mar-a-Lago or somewhere on the video, all dolled up. And she's not even at the meeting. And this has happened over and over again. You do things to try to get meetings scheduled for her benefit, and then she doesn't even show up, or she shows up on Zoom. But this year she hasn't shown up a lot. And I think her love, she's not running again, she says. So this would be a great time for her to step up and just get it over with. Don't have to have a meeting next week that runs amok and has 50 or 100 people there to speak. I thought about going there and speaking myself, because I have a lot of things I could say, but I'm not going to do that. But there will be a lot of people who will go there. And this brings up all of the bad things again to the school board that don't need to happen. We need to be about focusing on students and educating students. And this takes away from that. She will never be able to show her face in a school, I don't think, ever again. She
It's a
shouldn't.
tough one. It's a tough one. Everybody, if you've just joined us, you're listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota. Programming at WSLR is supported by listeners like you and by Ringling College Galleries and Exhibitions. Ringling College's 2023-24 exhibition season features art from Ringling students, alumni, faculty, and nationally recognized artists from a wide range of mediums and from diverse backgrounds. More information is available at ringlingcollege.gallery. And my guests are Jane Goodwin and Ron Filipkowski. We are talking about what's going on with our local politics and the Zieglers. Bridget Ziegler is co-founder of Moms for Liberty. She serves on the Sarasota School Board. She has acknowledged to the Sarasota police that she and her husband participated in an intimate relationship with another woman, which flies in the face of her "Don't Say Gay" anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, which has been pretty strong and painful for a lot of students and families in Florida. Ron, one of the things about Bridget, and I've seen this trend in different pockets of local government. There's two examples I can bring up, and I'm kind of one of the people that goes, "Hey, wait a minute, that's not right. You forgot about this." Early on, Moms for Liberty claims they were started by two moms. And Bridget, it's clearly was a co-founder of Moms for Liberty. Her name's on the paperwork, but she had tried to distance herself very early on from this. And without that connection, this might not be that big of a story. There's also the whole Casey DeSantis was the first Sarasota stateswoman of the year, which is a flat out lie. It was Liz Cheney. This kind of duplicity, and this is the thing that has really people upset, right? And that was when, Casey DeSantis was the first one. I'm like, wait, no, it was Liz Cheney, but they don't like Liz Cheney now. Have you seen this kind of just flat out lying? I mean, we know politics, it can get people fudge things, but I think with Bridget and Christian, there's just been an audacity locally and the Republican Party that's been pretty jaw-dropping.
Well, yeah, let me bring something you said earlier, you guys both said, together with what you just brought up, which is how this is going to play out politically locally, because what I have been told from a pretty reliable source is that the Sarasota Police Department is going to punt this to the state attorney. They are not going to make a decision on an arrest here. And that's going to happen in the next couple of days. And so what that means is Ed Brodsky is going to have this. Now, here's the problem with that. And this has not been brought up, which is, you mentioned Eric Robinson. Eric Robinson was Ed Brodsky's campaign treasurer. And if I'm not mistaken, Robinson and Ziegler are business partners, or at least were in the past, if they're not still.
Well, they've worked closely together
in their consulting business, the micro targeting. I want to say Robinson has a piece of that or is involved in it. I don't know, but I know that the two of them have been in business together. So the question becomes: is Ed Brodsky gonna? And the other thing is, I'm sure if we look at the political contributions, we're going to see lots of checks from the Zieglers to Brodsky and vice versa. So the question is going to become, is he going to recuse himself from this case? And he's already been asked this once. He was asked this by Zach Anderson, and he said no, he has no intention of recusing himself, which I am going to look. I've been friends with Ed for 25 years, but I'm going to make an issue out of that, because that he should recuse himself. From what I can see, there's just too many connections between his office and the Zieglers that I can't see how he can be fair and impartial in weighing all of this.
Yeah. Ed Brodsky recused himself in the city of Sarasota. Eric Arroyo was recently investigated by FDLE over potential improprieties with a nonprofit where he used the city of Sarasota's address to found the nonprofit. He called it the Sarasota City Foundation. He was taking donations without having registered with the state, getting certification to do that. And Brodsky recused from that, saying, hey, I know him. This is far more, I mean, that's money, right? This is a big, physical crime that's being looked at. I had hoped that,
I can also tell you, by the way, that his office prosecuted the victim previously on a criminal case.
Okay.
So there's all kinds of conflicts.
Yeah. So if you're going to do impartial justice, there's lots of reasons to back away. It appears to me, Ron, as an attorney, I'd like you to speak to the search affidavit, the police report. The default position a lot of times is, hey, this is a he said, she said when it comes to what happened with Christian Ziegler and the woman who is alleging rape. But boy, she's on a text.
This is a good topic.
Yeah, she's on
because
telling
as we know from January 6th, sorry to interrupt, but as we know from January 6th, Christian has a penchant for recording himself doing shady things and then deleting those recordings, which is what he did in DC on January 6th and what he did here in this case. The phone's the key because all this stuff is in the cloud. So, I think I'm going to predict that there's a lot of stuff in this phone pertaining. There's got to be thousands of text messages, videos, pictures, everything else. I don't think this is going to be the only woman. I think we're going to have a bunch more that are going to either come forward or be in that phone contacted by law enforcement. Here's my other question. Why haven't they gotten Bridget's phone? Why haven't they done a search warrant for her phone? Because there has to be tons of texts and stuff back and forth between the victim and Bridget. Why are they just checking Christian's phone? And there's got to be stuff from Christian to Bridget about the victim and about the incident. We know that. So why are they only looking at Christian's phone? So there's a lot here. I suspect there's going to be a lot of corrupt, and Christian's own story about this, which is, that he went over there after she told him, which he admits that she didn't want him over there, and he filmed the sex act. Why is he filming it? What's the explanation? I have heard different explanations that his plan was then to go take that film and to show it to Bridget because that was one of their things they like to do.
Wow.
So I've heard some different crazy explanations, but the bottom line is there is no good explanation for it, So no. I don't think his story, I don't understand why he sat down and spoke to the police. I mean, he locked himself into a story fairly early on that doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. And he's not going to be able to change that story very much as time goes on.
Yeah, well, and for those who aren't familiar with this, the affidavit that went to Google because it was his Gmail account where he uploaded these videos is being looked at. It was remarkable to me that a policewoman investigating the case was sitting with the victim when Christian Ziegler was texting her. And the notes are very clear and descriptive. He changes the subject when she talks about the attack. She said, no, you can't help me. You're the problem. You caused this. And he offered her money. So my point is, and, he's going to get due process, right? And of course, you're concerned the state attorney is, may have a bias here and recuse themselves. But I don't see this as any kind of typical he said, she said. There's a lot of written documentation and, things witnessed by that policewoman while the exchanges were happening with Christian, which bolsters what she has to say. It to me is like significant. Go
those
ahead.
Controlled calls are very common for these cases. It happens all the time.
Okay.
Because the initial reaction of someone who's innocent is going to be, what the hell are you talking about?
Right.
I didn't do that. I didn't force myself on you, but he didn't say that.
No.
That wasn't his reaction. His reaction was just to try and change the subject. Now, if you're being falsely accused of rape you're not just going to blase that, you know, you're going to be like, what are you talking about? You're lying, you know, but he didn't do that. And by the way, I have to tell you, I've got to go in 5 minutes because I've got my own show.
Okay. Okay. No
which
problem.
is live.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you one more thing. You know, given the history, one of the turning points for me in watching Bridget, because her recent election, it's the first time she's had a majority on the school board. She was always in a minority, right? Which Jane, you alluded to further. And the Proud Boys worked to get her elected. And then when she was in a photograph with Proud Boys at her celebration, she told the local newspaper they had nothing to do with the win. Clearly,
you know, now I monitor all the Proud Boys on social media, have for many years. Before January 6th, I was plugged into all the Proud Boys people. And they were very upset when she tried to disavow them and distance herself from them. They were furious. I mean, they were like, she's a sellout. She used us. We helped her get where she is now. And now she's acting like she doesn't know us. So yeah, I can just tell you that was their reaction.
Yeah. You know, prior to this, there was prior to what's happening, Moms for Liberty is losing members. But one of the issues is the affiliation between Moms for Liberty and the Proud Boys.
Absolutely. They're absolutely are connected.
Yeah, Ron, I know you have to go. Does Moms for Liberty survive? Does Bridget Ziegler politically survive this?
Well, those are separate things. Moms for Liberty, you know, they're in trouble. They're leaking water. And, you know, there's a lot of us out there that are, you know, battling them every day. And they're on the losing end of most of this. There are some other sort of Moms for Liberty adjacent, you know, right-wing mom groups that are cropping up that will probably take their place. The problem with Moms for Liberty is they didn't vet anybody. You know, they brought in all these people to run their local chapters and be their attorneys and speak for them at events. And they didn't even know who half these people were. And, you know, we're finding out one guy's a sex offender, you know, another person's, you know, doing this, doing that. And the whole thing is just coming apart on them, you know, because there was no vetting of any of these people. They're just, hey, you want to be Moms for Liberty chapter president? Sign on the dotted line. And they didn't know anything about these people. No, you know, so that's their biggest problem.
Yeah, because, you know, the whole controversy or criticism is this really isn't a grassroots organization. It came up too quickly. It's funded by Heritage Foundation. Ron, I'll let you go. I know you need to get to your show. Thanks so much, and I hope you come back as we.
Great to see both of you again. Yes.
You too. Thank you. Thanks for what you do. Bye-bye. So Jane, this Florida Coalition of School Board members, that to me, if you really want to go back and look at the genesis of Moms for Liberty, you've got to look at the Florida Coalition of School Board members, because Bridget and Tiffany Justice and Tina Deskovich were all on that board. So, you know,
don't forget about Erica Donalds.
Oh, that's right. She's like
and Sean Frost, who is a big lobbyist now. So, you know, there were 6 or 7 members only, one from Jacksonville, one from Vero, and one from Flagler and Collier and here.
And their agenda was the same privatization agenda.
Yes.
It didn't gain traction. They weren't able to get other school board members in the state on board. They always stayed a small organization. They stopped, you know, they disbanded in June of 2020 or around thereabouts. And then in December 2020, Moms for Liberty was born. They got this universal vouchers passed in Florida. And, you know, the problem with long-term destruction is righting that ship, you know, is going to take time. And a lot of times it's like people need a crisis before they really understand the damage that's been done. Do you see people waking up at all to realizing that the real agenda?
Well, I think the pure money part of it is the one of the things that's going to make people wake up. I mean, they grossly underfunded the voucher program because they said it was new people going in, and it is not. It's about 95% people already in the private schools. So when they do an accounting this year, and we look at the budget, the governor's already come out with this $114.4 billion budget prototype, I will call it. But when they look at the budget this year and do some analysis, it's scary, because they really underfunded this program, and they've had to go in and make some adjustments because special needs kids, ESE kids, were not getting the accommodations that they were promised. Kirtley and Step Up for Students has not been able to handle administratively all these new people that they have to get into the system. So it's been a nightmare this year. They try to tap that down so people don't know about it, but it's been a nightmare. And I think it will take, Arizona's a little ahead of us, and they're having great challenges now with this. So I think it is only a matter of a few months before we see how bad it is.
How bad it is. Jane, we're going to wrap it up. Is there a way that Bridget stays in office here?
No, I'm hoping that she'll be a big enough human to step up, apologize, and step down. Yeah. She needs to go home and take care of her own family and not take care of our kids, because what she wants to do with our kids is unacceptable, always has been. She doesn't really engage with any schools, with any programs at all. She never has. She doesn't go and visit schools. And I think this makes it more difficult for her to do any of that anyway. She had one motive, and that was to tear down. So my friend Taylor Swift said this morning in the Time magazine Person of the Year, I think this is pretty good, Cathy. She said, trash takes itself out every single time. I'm going to remember that.
I'm a Swiftie. I
am too.
My sons know that they're in the car with mom. She's going to put on Taylor Swift, and we're going to start singing. So anyway, Jane, thank you so much for joining me today. And everybody, you've been listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida.